The meeting is officially open. Let me welcome all the members of the committee. Yesterday, when we were about to close, they were indicated that there's a new member from the DA. I think Honorable Wendy Alexander. Is it so, Tebo? Alan, is there a new member from the DA so that we can officially welcome him?
Yes, Chair, it's Ms. Wendy Alexander. She's an alternate member to the Standing Committee on Finance.
No, okay. We'd like to welcome our colleague, Honorable Wendy Alexander, who has just joined us. You are warmly welcome to this committee. Thanks very much. We've already welcomed Honorable Pumulo Maswale, who has also joined us from the side of the ANC. So both of you are warmly welcome. Let's move, and also let me welcome officials from Treasury. I'm not sure with other entities here which reports to Treasury. If there are other entities, they are also welcome. Let me also welcome support teams from Parliament, starting with those who are directly working in our committee, supporting SCOF and PBO and other teams from Parliament. Then let's move, before moving, let's get apologies.
No apologies received, Chair.
No apologies. Who's leading the delegation from Treasury? Is the Deputy Minister here, or is it the DG, or who's leading the delegation?
Good morning. Good morning, Chair. I am leading the delegation. My name is Majeng Nalene. I'm the Deputy Director General responsible for intergovernmental relations in the National Treasury.
Okay, you are welcome, Madam. You can right away move to item 2 and take us through the Municipal Fiscal Powers and Functions Amendment Bill. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning to honorable members and all colleagues that are in this platform. So today we are briefing the honorable members of this committee on the amendments of the Municipal Fiscal Powers and Functions Act. So these amendments are meant to regulate better the municipal development charges. So we must indicate from the start that development charges is not necessarily a new financing instrument. It is an instrument that is used here in the country by municipalities, but also globally, it is an instrument that is used to finance infrastructure development. But what we have identified in the country is that it's not well regulated. Its use is not standardized. So what we are trying to do in this act is to standardize its use so that there is some degree of uniformity and transparency that will ensure that it is applied across all the jurisdictions in a more equitable, predictable, and fair manner. So this is an important instrument to finance infrastructure, as we have indicated. So I'm hoping that the presentation will come through, Wendy. So it is an important instrument.
Sorry, can you just indicate who do I need to make co-host to run the presentation?
Sandra Sekhele, please.
Okay. So it is an instrument to finance infrastructure, and infrastructure investment is quite key in our country, particularly at this time when there is a major concern about growing the economy, alleviating poverty and inequality, particularly in the context of increasing urbanization, wherein the fiscal is not able to keep pace with the demands of infrastructure. That also is important as an important platform for economic activities. So we do have a history of underinvestment in our infrastructure in terms of rehabilitation and the new infrastructure in order to meet the demands that are coming, particularly through rapid urbanization and growth in population. And then this actually has affected availability and reliability of municipal services, which is then becomes a constraint to economic activities and also to leveraging more investments in the private sector. So the land development projects are often delayed due to unavailability of infrastructure. So given that the economy is even contracting, as we have seen in the last quarter, that result in a fiscal constrained environment, it means that if we don't properly use these instruments that is aimed at leveraging the private sector and ensuring that the investment needs for their developments are provided on time, so we will actually miss the opportunity to help the country to actually attract investment and be able to grow. So the whole idea is to ensure that municipal services are available on time and they are reliable and they are able to sustain economic activities, and therefore boost the confidence that is required for future investments that we need to create jobs and increasing municipal revenue services, while also ensuring that we are properly leveraging the private sector in order to drive this investment. So I will give over to Wendy and the team to take us through the amendments that are being proposed in this act. Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to this committee. The DDG has set the scene for why it's important to introduce development charges. If you can go to the next slide, please. Marijeng has already in quite a lot of detail indicated that there's a lot of underinvestment in infrastructure, and it's not just resulted in the inability or unreliability of municipal services, it has also resulted in constraining economic growth and development. And what is quite a key point is how the municipal system is constructed. And what I'll do in the next few slides is to take you through how the system is configured, because what is quite important to note is that unlike provinces, which is basically fully reliant on the fiscus to do infrastructure rollout, municipalities are very, very different. We have 258 municipalities in the country. Next slide, please. What is quite important is that you get metros with huge budgets that collect most of their own revenues themselves. And then you get the smaller municipalities that's basically nearly fully reliant on the fiscus to fund their operations. And then we can also break down the expenditure in two categories, largely. We can look at capital expenditures and revenues and operating revenues and expenditure. And what is quite important here is that today's discussion is basically to focus on enhancing the infrastructure revenue that's available to municipalities. So what is done, and it will vary per municipality. Like I've indicated, the larger urban municipalities, they already use a host of revenues at their disposal to fund the expenditure responsibilities, and the equitable share and conditional grants are then a top up to fill the gap. But it's definitely not there just to fund all the operations. And then if you look at the right-hand column, it then indicates what type of services municipalities provide. and the development charges are intended to target some of the infrastructure expenditure related to these services. If you can then go to the next slide. And this is the very important one because municipalities, they collect their own revenues, and when they do infrastructure investment, we need to look at it differently. It would be very unfair to expect the poor to pay for infrastructure investment and then you know, introduce things like development charges and expect them to then do the infrastructure. So the infrastructure grant system that is given by the National Fiscal are targeted at poor households. So what you will get, free basic water, free basic electricity, the houses required, etc., will be funded by government. No development charges will be attributed to that. But where a private investor or, for example, a non-poor household want to, for example, institutionalize municipal services because they bought a new house, they built a new building for their business, then those are required to pay for those services through tariffs. And in those tariffs, there could also be levies for infrastructure. What the presentation will take you through today is that, so this is a new type of charge, not in terms of new, but for a number of municipalities, it will be new because they've just been too scared to actually levy it in the past. It was regulated by provincial ordinances in the past, but a lot of municipalities steered away from it because there were just too much litigation and not a clear regulatory framework. So what we're trying to do is enhance the current system so that there are more revenues available for infrastructure investment. But like this sketch indicates, it differentiates how the system treats the various ratepayers in the municipalities. Next slide, please. And I'm going to hand over to Sandra, that's going to be part of the presentation, and then Matrini as well, that will take you through the actual clauses of the bill. Thank you very much. Sandra, over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Sandra Sakatla, as already indicated. So I will take you through some few slides and Matrini will finish up the presentation. So this slide just shows some of the funding instruments for infrastructure in municipalities, which Wendy has already indicated. So I won't necessarily repeat them. Conditional grants, own revenues, borrowing, and some of the land-based financing instruments. So I will also go through the problem statement, the reason why we have reviewed the Municipal Fiscal Powers and Function Act. So the development charges are a once-off charge levied by a municipality on the applicant as a condition for approving land development applications. They are imposed to cover the costs incurred by the municipality when installing new infrastructure or upgrading existing infrastructure. So they are one of the instruments that municipalities can use as an alternative option for financing infrastructure. The general concept of a development charge is that the urban growth and expansion of new land use development creates the need for additional infrastructure services. So the cost of these services are essentially created by the development. So we're therefore saying that they should be paid by the developer. And this will avoid the financial burden being imposed on municipalities or existing communities. So as Wendy already indicated, development charges are not a new thing. They've been in place for a number of years, but municipalities have not really used them effectively because they are currently regulated through a number of ordinances that do not cover the full country and that also have different rules. So in addition, none of these pieces of legislation provide clarity on how development charges should be levied. And this has created legal ambiguity and increased the scope of litigation for municipalities. In 2015, an analysis was undertaken, or a study that was undertaken by National Treasury, determined that metropolitan municipalities alone are under-investing in infrastructure networks by approximately 15 billion per annum. So what we are saying is that the development charges could assist municipalities to address some of these funding gaps. Another study that was undertaken also by Treasury indicated that municipalities failed to recover in the region of 20 billion per annum that could otherwise be raised as development charges. So this ineffectiveness in the utilization of development charges as a source to finance municipal infrastructure really has a profound negative economic impact, such as underinvestment in infrastructure and unfair charging of existing residents for the expansion of infrastructure networks, and while providing a windfall benefit to applicants who don't pay. So to address all these challenges, National Treasury, in collaboration with the relevant stakeholders, initiated a process of reviewing and reforming the framework for municipal development charges in order to for municipalities to effectively use development charges to fund infrastructure investment. So some of this slide just outlines the objectives and key reforms that is introduced in the bill. So overall, the bill seeks to regulate development charges, but also the bill seeks to establish an ambiguous, fair, and consistent basis for municipalities to recover the development charges. It also brings about a more standardized, equitable, and sustainable framework for financing infrastructure based on the benefit principle. So the bill also seeks to enable applicants to accurately estimate their development charges liabilities and ensure that municipalities are able to provide the required infrastructure timelessly. So once the bill is enacted, it will ensure accountability and transparency in the establishment, collection, and expenditure of development charges. It will also provide uniformity, meaning the principle and method of calculation will be the same across the municipalities. The bill will also create legal certainty for all the parties on how development charges should be imposed and regulated. And lastly, the bill will also promote accountability and predictability that current residents, especially the poor, are not required to subsidize the cost of commercially viable developments. These are some of the benefits of development charges, both for municipalities and for applicants. So the first one for municipality, we're saying that in effective system of this is, it will enhance revenue streams for financing strategic municipal infrastructure. It will also provide a pledgeable revenue stream to support borrowing for infrastructure. It will bring uniformity across all municipalities on the application of DCs, which will eliminate unfair competition or treatment of applicants both within and between municipal jurisdiction. So lastly, it also gives a clear legal framework that will minimize litigations in the administration of development charges. So what we're saying for applicants is also, it will also be beneficial for application because the legislative framework will ensure that the development charges are managed in a manner that promotes firstly predictability, where applicants will be able to accurately estimate their liabilities and hold municipalities to account for the timely delivery of required infrastructure. It will also promote fairness, where applicants pay only for the infrastructure investment which they benefit from, and also transparency, which ensures equitable and transparent allocation of the costs of the infrastructure installed and its quality. So this slide just shows how development charges will work or how it can be implemented just between the municipalities and the applicants, where the municipalities are mostly responsible for the external infrastructure or the bulk infrastructure, and how the applicants can come in by paying for the internal infrastructure. So this slide just shows some of the stakeholders that have been consulted in the process that I not necessarily want to just go through. And We have received extensive comments and refined the bill accordingly. And recently, we've had a feedback session with all the stakeholders to inform them of the outcome of the public consultation process. I will then leave it for Matulia to finalize.
Thanks, Sandra. Good morning. My name is Machene, so I'll be taking you through the rest of the presentation. I'll be focusing on the key concepts in the bill. I'll also take you through a summary of the clauses in the bill. Thanks, Sandra. So in terms of the definitions that are contained in the bill, the first one relates to the external engineering services, which means engineering services that are situated outside the boundaries of a land area and are necessary to serve the use and the development of the land area. And these external engineering services are made up of two portions, namely bulk engineering services as well as link engineering services, where bulk engineering services refers to the capital infrastructure asset, which is associated with that portion of external engineering service. And this is intended to ensure the delivery or the provision of municipal engineering services for the benefit of multiple users or the community as a whole, whether existing or to be provided as a result of development in terms of the municipal spatial development framework. And the link engineering service means a capital infrastructure asset, which is associated with that portion of external engineering service, which links an internal engineering service to the applicable bulk engineering service. So this one can also be referred to as a connector engineering services, because it just connects or links internal engineering services to the bulk engineering service. And also to mention that the provision of this external engineering service is the responsibility of the municipality. Then another definition is the internal engineering service, and it means an engineering service within the boundary of a land area, which is necessary for the use and the development of the land area, which is to be owned and operated by the municipality or a service provider. So in accordance with SPLUMA section 49, it clearly indicates that the applicant is the applicant's responsibility to provide for internal engineering services. Then the last definition there relates to a rebate. This means a reduction that a municipality may grant in terms of section 9E of the bill on the amount of development charges payable for a category of applicants or a category of land development as per the criteria determined in the municipality's policy on development charges. Next slide. Then this one relates to the summary of the bill or the contents of the bill. So the first one is clause 9A, which relates to the power to levy development charges. So this clause mainly is just to indicate who is responsible for levying development charge. And we're saying that the responsibility or the power to levy development charge lies with the municipal council. So we're saying that a municipality may levy a development charge in respect of a land development application, which will be submitted to it in terms of section 33(1), read with section 49 of Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act. And we are saying municipality may, because we are also linking it to the provisions of the Constitution in section 229 of the Constitution, because the Constitution is saying that a municipality may levy property rates and service charges. Then this also means that the municipality has a choice whether to levy development charge or not. But if the municipality decides to levy development charges, then its municipal council must adopt a resolution for the municipality to levy development charge and thereafter comply with this act. Next slide. Then clause 9B, it relates to the adoption and the contents of a policy on development charges. So I've indicated in the previous section that if a municipality decides to levy development charges, it has to comply with the act. So what are some of the provisions that a municipality has to comply with? Then a municipal council will be expected to adopt a policy consistent with this act on the levying of development charges in the municipality. Then this policy must, among others, treat applicants liable for development charges equitably and fairly. It must ensure that there's no duplication of cost in the manner in which development charges are calculated. So this one just means that if the municipality has a choice in terms of which revenue source to use to fund the required infrastructure. So if they're going to use development charges, they cannot go and use service charges or borrowing or any other revenue source. So there shouldn't be any duplication of costs. Then lastly, the development charges policy has to set out the methodology for calculating of a unit cost per engineering service. So the municipality has to ensure that there is fairness in the calculation, in that it must be based on the impact norms. So the impact that the land development will have on the infrastructure. And also that the cost must be transparent in that the quantity of infrastructure to be provided, it has to be quantified. And it must also be reasonable in that it excludes other funding sources. Next slide. Clause 9C relates to community participation. So here we're just indicating that before a municipality adopts this DC policy, it must follow a process of community participation that is consistent with Chapter 4 of the Municipal Systems Act. And the municipality must then display this draft policy on development charges for a period of 30 days to give the community a chance to provide inputs and comments. And they can also advertise in the media in a manner provided for in Section 21 of the Municipal Systems Act. Next slide, please. Clause 9D relates to the bylaws to give effect to policy on development charges. So basically, this clause just shows that a DC policy on its own cannot be enforced. So in order for a DC policy to be enforced, then a municipality must adopt and publish a bylaw to give effect to this policy on development charges. Then and then we also provided a provision, given that municipalities have various plans that they have to develop or bylaws to develop. So we are also allowing them to integrate the bylaw on development charges into existing municipal bylaws or a related area of municipal legislative competence. So they do not have to come up with a new bylaw altogether. They can use the existing municipal bylaws that are there within their municipality. Next slide, please. Clause 9E relates to the rebate and exemptions. So on this slide, on this clause, we're just saying that a municipality that has opted to levy development charges in terms of Section 9A may grant a rebate for the category of applicants or a category of land development through reducing the development charges payable in respect thereof, or exempt a category of applicants or category of land developments from paying development charges where it has set out a criteria for rebate or exemption in its policy on development charges. So basically we're saying that municipalities are allowed to grant rebates or exemptions to applicants, but before they do that, they should ensure that within their policy for development charges, they had set out a criteria in terms of who qualifies to get a rebate as well as an exemption. Then if a rebate or exemption is granted in terms of Section 1, then the municipality must set out the reasons and identify an alternative revenue source for the required bulk engineering services to the value of the rebate or the exemption. Next slide, please. Then clause 9F relates to the engineering services agreement. So we have this clause in the bill just to ensure that we protect both the rights of the municipality as well as the rights and obligations of the applicant. So we are saying that an engineering services agreement must be concluded in respect of any approved land development which necessitate the installation of internal engineering services or external engineering services, whether by the municipality or an applicant. So we are saying whether by a municipality or an applicant, given that the municipality has the responsibility for providing the external engineering services. But again, it can also agree that the applicant installs that infrastructure on behalf of the municipality, but I will indicate more information on this in the next slide. Then we are saying that some of the provisions that should be regulated within this engineering services agreement should, or at least indicate the following matters: the nature and the extent of the internal engineering services or external engineering services that must be installed by the municipality or an applicant, the timing of the commencement as well as the completion of the internal engineering services or external engineering services that must be installed by the municipality or an applicant. Also, the amount of an applicant's cost of installation or the process for determining that amount. Next slide, please. Clause 9G relates to the installation of external engineering services by an applicant. So here we're just indicating instances where an applicant will be requested to provide external engineering service on behalf of the municipality. So a municipality which levies development charges may agree in writing with an applicant that the applicant installs all or part of the bulk engineering services, which is required for an approved land development. And then the municipality may offset the cost of installation of such bulk engineering services against the associated development charges. So instead of paying in monetary terms, then the applicant will just install the bulk engineering services. A municipality may require that bulk engineering services are installed to accommodate a greater capacity than that which is required for the land development in order to support future development in the area of the land development as determined by the municipality. So in cases where a municipality knows that there will be future development around or closer to the area where the development is happening, the municipality may request that the infrastructure that has to be installed has to be a greater capacity than what the applicant's land development actually requires. If the cost of installing bulk engineering services by an applicant then exceeds the development charge for the land development, the municipality must reimburse or offset the amount in excess of the development charge. And this must be done in accordance with an agreed payment schedule. But then the reimbursement must be done in a period that is not existing, a period of 3 years from the date of completion of the installation by an applicant, unless the applicant waives his or her right to reimbursement of that amount or any part thereof. Next slide, please. Clause 9H relates to the non-installation of bulk engineering services by a municipality. So what are some of the remedial actions that can be taken against the municipality if a municipality fails to complete the installation of the required bulk engineering services? So we are saying that if a municipality fails to complete the installation of bulk engineering services within a period of 12 months from the completion date as stipulated in the engineering service agreement, then the municipality must reimburse the applicant that portion of the development charge which is attributed to the failure. Then this repayment or this reimbursement will be linked with interest charged at the applicable rate as determined in terms of Section 80, subsection 1A of the PFMA, and calculated from the date of completion as stipulated in the engineering services agreement. So if they had agreed that the installation of bulk engineering services will be completed, for example, in May, and then by May it was not completed, so the municipality has failed to complete the installation, then they will start calculating from June, what is the applicable interest from that June until the 12th month, and then this amount will be added to the development charges that would have paid by the applicant as reimbursement amount to the applicant. The municipality and applicant may agree to extend the time period for completion of the bulk services by the municipality. So we put in this provision, given that there might be exceptional circumstances that are outside the control of the municipality, which will hinder the municipality to finalize or to complete the installation of the bulk engineering services. So we put a provision that both the municipality and the applicant may agree to extend that time period. So if they do agree to extend the time period and the municipality is able to complete the installation by that extended time frame, then the municipality will not be liable to reimburse the applicant. Next slide, please. Clause 9.1 relates to bulk and link engineering services as part of the internal engineering services. So we put in this clause, taking into consideration that there are circumstances where you find that a bulk engineering services or a link engineering services crosses the land development area of a certain applicant. And when subsequent applicants comes, they might refuse to pay for that bulk or engineering services because they might view it to say that because it is internal to a certain land development, then it's an internal engineering services and not external engineering services, and refuse to pay for that. So to protect the municipality, we put in this provision to say that where a bulk or link engineering service is intended to service the subsequent developments and transverse the internal boundaries of the land development by an applicant, both services must be regarded as external engineering services. Next slide, please. Then clause 9J relates to the dispute resolutions. So this clause is just to provide dispute resolution mechanisms to any person that feels that their rights have been affected by a decision regarding development charges taken by a municipality. So we are saying that if a person feels that their rights have been affected by this decision, they may appeal against that decision in accordance with the mechanisms provided for in Section 62 of the Municipal System Act. Then the next one is saying that where a dispute arises in relation to any matter that is regulated by an engineering service agreement, then that dispute must be resolved in accordance with the dispute resolution mechanism provided for in that agreement. So in the previous slide where we were talking about the engineering services, one of the provisions that should be regulated within that engineering services is the dispute resolution. So they have to indicate or come up with a dispute resolution in terms of if either party, the municipality or the applicant, default from their roles and responsibilities as part of the agreement, then how are they going to deal with those kind of defaults? The next slide, please. Clause 9K relates to the delegations. So this one is just indicating some of the powers or duties that have been conferred upon the municipality that can be delegated to an official within the employ of the municipality. But the most important thing here is to indicate that except to the extent provided otherwise in this chapter or in other legislation, a power or duty conferred upon a municipality in terms of this chapter, other than the power of a municipal council to adopt a development charges policy and a bylaw, may be delegated to an official of the relevant municipality. So other powers can be delegated except the power to adopt a DC policy as well as to adopt a bylaw. Next slide, please. Clause 9L relates to the financial misconduct. So what should be the consequences if an official of a municipality is found to be willfully or negligently contravening the provisions of this act? So you're saying that Section 171 of the Municipal Finance Management Act will apply with the necessary changes required by the context. Next slide, please. On this slide, we're just indicating what should municipality do in order to prepare for the passing of the legislation to ensure that they will be able to implement it once it has been enacted into an act. So the first bullet there just indicates that where a municipality decides to levy development charges, then a municipal council must adopt a resolution for the municipality to levy development charges, thereafter comply with the bill. And by complying with the bill means adopting a policy consistent with this act, and also adopting and publishing a bylaw. And the third bullet, I've already alluded to it, that municipalities are allowed to integrate the bylaws for development charges into other bylaws relating to municipal planning or any related area of municipal legislative competence. And lastly, a municipality which levies development charges in terms of a pre-existing policy or a bylaw, as at the date of commencement of the act, must ensure that it complies with the act within a period of 36 months after the date of commencement of this act. So we put in this, sorry, Sandra, we put in that provision because we know that there are municipalities there that are already levying development charges. So the time frame of 36 months, we feel that it is sufficient, given that they already have policies and bylaws in place, and all that they need to do is just to update it in line with the provisions of the legislation. Thanks, Sandra. Next slide. And what support will National Treasury provide to municipalities to ensure that they are well capacitated to ensure successful implementation of the bill once enacted? To ensure successful implementation of the development charges, municipalities will be equipped with the necessary tools and skills. And National Treasury has already appointed a service provider to undertake a capacity assessment of different categories of municipalities to implement development charges. So the aim of this capacity assessment is just to know what are the capacity needs within all these municipalities, so that we are able to develop the necessary tools and provide them with skills to be able to implement development charges. So National Treasury, so over and above the tools that will be developed following the capacity assessment, National Treasury will also issue regulations and develop implementation guidelines, including a development charges calculator, pro forma DC policy, bylaws, as well as engineering services to be used by municipalities as is, or use their own DC policies as they see fit. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the end of our submission to the committee. Thank you.
Thanks, colleagues from National Treasury for the presentation. Let me take honorable members of the committee who would like to ask clarity-seeking questions and or make comments. Over to you, honorable members. Dr. George.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask about the energy problem that we have at the moment. From the financial perspective of municipalities, they rely heavily on income from selling electricity. And given the problems we've got, the revenue clearly is going to be less because there isn't any energy to sell. And that is not going to be resolved in the longer run, or sorry, in the shorter run. In the longer run, yes, hopefully it will get resolved. But in the immediate frame, we know many municipalities, well, they haven't paid their bills, never mind. But the fact is that they are collecting the money, and they are therefore most likely a little bit more financially viable than they would have been otherwise, although many are in trouble for other reasons though. So have you considered that, or is that not in fact something to be worried about? And if so, why? Yeah, that's my key question, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. George. Honorable Abraham, then Honorable Alexander.
Thank you, Chair.
Of course, I will come to you, Shenge. Okay. Over to you, Noxie.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair. I wish to thank the presenters from National Treasury. The introductory remarks by Wendy were quite telling in terms of what's happening in municipalities. And I think my main concern will be to say, do we as National Treasury, do we think that the municipalities are empowered enough to deal with the bill as it is? For example, you are talking, when you talk of the power to levy, you talk of policies by council. And I was happy at the end when Macheni mentioned regulations as well, because I was worried that in some cases, you'll find that some municipalities do not have the necessary capacity. And I was wondering whether there aren't any guidelines that would give direction to how the power to levy should be should be implemented. That goes also for the issue of granting of exemption and rebate to applicants. And I think we just need to get a glimpse of what is happening in the Municipal Act that Macheni is referring municipalities to in the various sections, because you want to be certain in your mind that there will be uniformity, as she says, in the various municipalities. So for me, the main question really is the issue of the capacity within municipalities, and whether we are not risking, if we leave a lot of decisions to be taken at that point, whether we shouldn't stick to legislation that will bind municipalities. I think, in my view, I here stand correct to be corrected. In my view, there seems to be a lot of openness in terms of what each municipality can do in dealing with the levies. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thanks, Noxie. Honorable Alexander.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Treasury, for the presentation. And, you guys do excellent work when it comes to supporting with guidelines and regulations. My question is that municipalities can fund themselves through the various things, conditional grants, selling of services rendered, and now this development charge. And in the stagnating economy, we need to see that the municipalities do generate more of their own income, as alluded to by Dr. George. Like, how will that support? And just from, the Auditor General, who will say that 16%, so less than 20% of the municipalities in South Africa are getting clean audits and functioning well. And you'll see in the big municipalities, often conditional grants reduce year on year, and that's not necessarily because there isn't money in Treasury, but it's because an administrative process isn't followed correctly in the municipalities in order to get those grants. However, it severely hinders the municipality's ability to deliver services, infrastructure, and housing, that where some of the municipalities are responsible for housing. The other key issue is, so what is Treasury going to do, or is there a plan for Treasury to help support municipalities in order for them to better make use of conditional grants in order to fund this? And secondly is, while all municipalities, according to the Constitution, are independent and make their own decisions, we are all still interdependent, and often these policies are influenced by other spheres of government. How do we align local, provincial, and national government in order to make these things a reality? You know, year after year, we see missed opportunities because planning cycles are incorrect or budget cycles are missed. And that, you know, just to administratively to see that our people are losing out on delivery of basic services, what can we do, or what is being done to capacitate municipalities in order to better make use of the systems available, make use of grants available? And when we are seeing things that the Auditor General is saying, these things aren't working, municipalities are failing, do we go back to the drawing board and say, how do we successfully set municipalities up to do better? So that's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Alexander. Nkosi Shenge.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning to all members. I just want to have a clarity here. Maybe it was covered, I just missed it, but it didn't sit in my mind for me to understand better. That looking at the state of our municipalities, is this bill not going to, in a way, discourage investment? Because we all understand that government has to create that enabling environment and provide basic infrastructure for business to be attracted and to grow. So if then people are expected to pay for particular services, we understand that they should, but is that not going to be counterproductive? And also looking at the fact that, say, a business person has paid the money, then they started to do business in that particular area. Our municipalities are trying to provide the very, very basic services. What will happen then if those businesses can no longer continue because the same municipality is not able to service them properly in a manner that actually will ensure that their business continues to operate, like the provision of water, collection of the provision of water and all those basic services, so to say. And the third question is that in terms of the rebate, is this not going to be open for abuse as far as they are concerned, to say, we know what's happening, all of us in municipalities, that maybe some people will be exempted, wrongly so, just because they happen to be friends to whoever that is in charge. So is this bill going to make sure that there are no leakages of that nature? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks, Nkosi Shenge. Jali.
No, ngiyathokoza Sihlalo. Begodu ngiyalotshisa woke amalunga ahloniphekile kwakhona. Nama representatives from the National Treasury and everybody else. Yeah, no, Chair, we welcome the presentation. Though I did not capture all of it because I think at some point I left the meeting a bit. But I just want to find out as to whether do we think is it an issue, the fact that municipalities are struggling financially, and especially in relation to the issue of developmental levy, is it really an issue of a policy gap, or is an issue of the fact that municipalities, they don't have capacity to collect revenue? Because I think some of the municipalities that I know, I think they do have a development levy as part of the services that are supposed to be paid by the residents. But I think developmental levy, I think it's also part of those services that the residents don't pay for, even those who are affording, those who are qualifying to pay, because we all know that there are those who are categorized as indigent, which they are not supposed to pay. But those who are supposed to pay, part of the money that they don't pay, it includes that developmental levy. So do we think that it's an issue of a policy gap that we need to then introduce this legislation to perhaps strengthen the hand of the municipality to collect the developmental levy, or is it an issue of capacity that municipalities are unable to collect because they don't have capacity, they don't have strategies to apply in order to encourage and make sure that everybody who is supposed to pay does pay? Because I mean, if a person can afford to pay for water, but that person decides not to pay for water, do we think then if we introduce a developmental levy, maybe if in that municipality they were not paying for, do we think then that person will then start to pay for it? Thank you very much, Chair.
Siyathokoza, Jali. Treasury, please respond to those questions raised by honorable members.
Wendy, can you start? Then I will add.
Certainly, I'll start, and thank you for the questions. Maybe what is quite important to point out is that municipalities, and we know that there are municipalities that perform well, and there's many municipalities that do not perform well. What we need to look at, this is a specific intervention. There are many other interventions in place to deal with a lot of challenges that's currently being experienced by municipalities. So the issue that municipalities and a number of municipalities are not capable or not fully capable of collecting their own revenues. We've got initiatives in place in National Treasury to assist municipalities in that regard. And one of the things that we're working with municipalities is to improve the tariff setting processes, to assist them also with their collection processes. So there are quite a bit of initiatives underway to assist municipalities with their general operations. What makes development charges different to like property tax and tariffs and the like? This is a very specific levy that's targeted at developers. It is done at one specific point. So it's not a normal municipal bill that you will get monthly. It is a specific levy that becomes liable at a land application. For example, where land is currently classified as agriculture, when you've got agricultural properties, for example, municipalities are not really required to put much connector services in place and to be residential. What happens that one big plot of land, yes?
We were losing you, Wendy. Maybe you can switch off the video so that you have got a better connectivity.
Certainly. Okay, and for example, where you've got a property that's currently classified, for example, as agriculture, that's just close to an urban edge, for example. And as we know that, cities are growing at a phenomenal pace. And then there's one connection for water, one connection for example, for electricity and the like. But a developer then identifies that land and wants to have it reclassified, for example, as a residential. What then happens is that instead of the bulk that's currently in place that's sufficient, you need many more connections in place. So when an application is made by a developer to have the land reclassified from agricultural to residential, at that point, the development charges become applicable. And it then enables the municipality to put in place that bulk infrastructure that's needed for that development. Without the water connection, without the roads, without the electricity connection, that residential property will not develop them. So it's to the benefit of the developer, and it's to the development, the benefit of the municipality, because it enables the developer to use that land, to put residential properties in place, and to take that cost that it then incurs to put that infrastructure in place is then reflected in the market value of the property that's sold. The municipality also benefits from the process, because then it's got access to property rights, for example, and the like. So it's what we're really trying to do through this legislation is a win-win situation. So there's currently definitely a policy gap in the system, because currently there's a number of provincial regulations in place that's all differently structured, all with different rules. It doesn't cover the full of South Africa. It covers the former, areas only. For example, it does not include the full country. And what will happen is it's standardized across the country. It includes the full country. And so development charges will more consistently be applied than what it currently is. It's not a new development charge are levied currently, but very few municipalities do it. And it's basically currently also the few that levies it is largely the larger urban municipalities. A lot of medium-sized or intermediate cities are also looking at levying development charges, and they're actually waiting for this piece of legislation to come in place. Then the question was asked, what do we do with regard to the fact that there's flexibility in the system? Why can we not just make it uniform? And it's really what is required, a stipulation in the Constitution. And there's two things that's quite important here. The first is that the Constitution does not refer to must. It even refers to property tax as may. So the Constitution makes it clear that we can regulate it in terms of national legislation, but we cannot make it a must. So the choice of levying development charges will always remain with the municipality. And what we can do from our side is just regulate it through national legislation. So we do need to respect the flexibility and autonomy that given to municipalities to levy their own taxes. This is what development charges are trying to do. So to make it as uniform as possible, but still allowing municipalities with the necessary flexibility to deal with their own circumstances. And then a number of concerns were raised with regard to rebates and also exemptions, and that there's going to or could potentially be quite a bit of leakage in the system in that regard. But we also need to look at the benefits of having that in place. For example, let's look at it because we've presented it as a clean slate that everything is just development charges. But in some mixed development projects, you will get a situation, for example, where there's a part that's economic infrastructure or where people can pay for the services, and a part of the service is also social, where people are indigent and they cannot pay for the services. So the indigent part is funded through the grants that's in the system, and the rest of the portion is then funded through the development charges. So you can have a mix of revenues also funding a development project. So in certain cases, you would say then the rebate should be applicable. In that case where the social infrastructure is in place, a full rebate on zero payment is required for that side of the development, and development charges are not applicable to the indigent, but the part that is covered by the paying consumer, or where the customer will be able to pay, that is subject to development charges. So the rebate can play a very critical role in ensuring that the social relief is provided where it's necessary. But then you can also look at where rebate will not be applicable, but rebate will be applicable. And for example, we all know that there are very different players in the field in terms of developers. You get very well big established developers, and then you get upcoming developers as well. So you would want a situation where you get an SMME that's just coming into the development space. You also do not want to overcharge him to such an extent that he walks away from the project. So in certain cases, in terms of very specific criteria determined by a municipality, those will then be applied. So that will be applicable to certain categories. So a municipality will have to be quite specific. In these cases, if you meet the following criteria, you will get a rebate. If you meet the following criteria, you will get an exemption. Of course, the municipality should be fully aware that in those cases, they will be forfeiting revenue, and they need to put that transparently in their books as well. So that is very important. So we must look at the benefits. And yes, if it's not well applied, if municipalities are not good in putting that criteria to be quite clear, then they can always fix it in future years. But let's really hope that it's not intended there for leakage in the system. It's intended there to ensure a fair playing field. Then with regard to the Municipal Systems Act, the Municipal Systems Act deals with if there's a dispute, and we all want a situation where it does not happen, but we also need to keep in mind that in those cases, in certain cases it can happen. So the only thing that it does, the Municipal System Act prescribes the process in terms of how a dispute should be dealt with. We can provide the committee with those clauses so that you can work through it as well. And Machweni, you can add there if you feel necessary as well. Then the issue of stagnating revenues are mentioned, and maybe we may need to be quite frank with the committee. Currently, what happens is that municipalities have got their IDPs and their development plans, and they've got areas that they've targeted for development. So where they intend to put in infrastructure and bulk infrastructure. But often developers come where land is cheap, where municipal services are not in place. And currently what happens is that charge is placed on municipalities to put in place. So currently in this process, municipalities are the losers. What we want through the development charges and regulating it is to ensure a fair balance of where the expenditure lies. Because like I indicated previously, when a development is put in place, the developer recoups those costs through either selling the businesses that they put in place on those properties or the residential properties, for example. So it's really to balance the fair playing field. So this is a gap in the system that we're trying to address. It is an international practice to levy development charges on these type of developments, and it's currently not happening. Then with regard to conditional grants being allocated, either being reduced or being returned to the fiscus, yes, that's an important issue. Like I indicated, it is an area that is of concern to National Treasury as well. And we do also not want to see funds being returned to the fiscus, but those funds are often linked to social infrastructure. So we can, the development charges are still a critical funding tool, and we need to deal with the under expenditure on conditional grants as a separate initiative, but a very important initiative. And then with regard to the policy issue gap I've already dealt with. I'm just checking if I've missed anything. I think I've dealt with everything. DDG, if I can hand back to you, please.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Wendy. So, honorable members, I think the question that was asked, the energy question, and the problem of reliance on it as income, and what is happening now, whether we are worried. We are worried about overall the poor performance, particularly in the management of revenue. So what we are finding is that even with the current problems of energy shortages and the possibility of many paying customers exiting the grid and reducing the demands, it's a problem that comes on top of already a problem that we see, which is of the failure to actually manage the system. I mean, it's the same thing with water, with energy, in terms of just the maintenance, you know, so the losses, the revenue losses that comes from the losses of energy, the losses of water is huge. So if municipalities can plug that hole, it will go a long way in protecting the revenue. So we also find that many of them don't necessarily set cost-reflective tariffs. So even though we are saying the revenue is declining because of some of those factors, but we are finding that many of them don't, and many of them were not necessarily even applying surcharges on electricity. So which means that what has been important has been to ensure that you recover sufficiently, you know, on the service, so that then you are able to actually pay for the service and maintain the infrastructure, which I think it's a major challenge that we see, which is really beyond just having the revenue that you can take and use elsewhere. Because what we are finding is that the same revenue was not properly applied to ensure that the infrastructure is actually functioning properly. So that is a worry, that is a concern for us, and we are stepping up efforts in terms of revenue management. So we are focused a lot through our Municipal Finance Improvement Program, that within that we have got a revenue improvement program. So we are really much focused on addressing the issues of the revenue just from the value chain perspective, looking at how they bill, collect, and also the issues of maintenance in terms of plugging the holes and the leakages that come from the loss of the resource, whether it's water or energy. But I think what should not be underestimated is the impact of political instability and dysfunctionality in this municipality that often undermine the very efforts that we are trying to make from the technical aspects to capacitate these municipalities. It undermines them in the sense of you sometimes don't have that political will in the system, and often because the political level decides the nature of the administration, that you find that you don't have the right skills, and yet we have got people there that are actually being paid very well, but that cannot deliver. And you also have this issue of instability that the coalition governments have also brought, which has also impacted even our metro in a big way. Many of these metros, the banks are not considering them credit worthy because of the political instability that then result in the failure of the administration to actually be able to play its developmental role. So that political problem, I think it must not be underestimated because it undermines every effort. So there's discontinuity. You think you have improved, the next time you turn around, things just collapse like a rocket, you know. So I think for us, where we sit, it's a major challenge. And we do think that there is a need for a reform, a legislative reform in the system that will perhaps better maybe regulate the functioning of these coalitions, which one would have expected that they would be more focused on service delivery. But honestly, I don't think that's what we are seeing because the problem seems to be multiplied. So regulating better the coalitions, and also perhaps regulating better the administration in terms of professionalizing it and shielding it from too much political influence. So I think for me, if those things are not cannot be considered, we will continuously be chasing our tails, spending huge amount of money, but we see the system still continuing to collapse. So, so I think Wendy has, I don't know, Wendy, if you have indicated that we are actually, in terms of capacitating municipalities to be able to apply these development charges, we already have put measures in place to be able to help unearthing the capacity gaps, but also providing more guidelines. Even we can even provide guidelines in terms of how their policies would actually look like. So I think the capacity to deliver infrastructure, I think it really falls in the point that I have made in terms of capacity. But in terms of the initiative, we do have municipal infrastructure service, what do you call, municipal infrastructure delivery support agency that is under COCTA, which is funded about more than 300 million a year, that is meant to actually capacitate this. In addition to the sectors that also have got to play a role to oversee the implementation of their infrastructure. So we are playing the role in support with the sectors, but we certainly, as National Treasury, will never have that capacity to solve this problem across all sectors, across the 257 municipalities. It's absolutely impossible. So, but we are trying to play a role that could be catalytic, that will enable all other government agencies to play their role, so that we are able to deliver on this infrastructure in the way that meets the needs. Yeah. So I think, Honorable Chair, that is the additions that I just thought I could make. Thank you.
Thanks for your responses. Let me also ask questions here, because there's things that I don't also understand. One, is this development charge going to be a once-off, or every month an investor or a developer must pay charges? And if so, why? Because they are paying for property rates, other services like water, electricity, and other related services. On top of that, at the time when, I think Honorable Shianga has put it in course, at the time when we need investors, government is putting barriers to investors. Because I don't see how this is going to attract investment. Many investors complain that there are so many regulations in the government of South Africa. If you go to other governments or jurisdictions in Rwanda and other countries, they've got a one-stop service where you go in there, you register a company, you pay for this, you do that, then tomorrow you operate. But here in South Africa, every day we are putting new regulations. The investors are leaving South Africa unless we are not alive to that. So I don't understand. I need to be educated. What is the rationale for this development charge? Because instead, the other time when the president was launching a project in Tshwane, I think the investor there is Baldwin Properties, something like that. He indicated that government has come on board and provided bulk services. And Baldwin never paid for the bulk services. it is the Tshwane and provincial or national government which is bringing those bulk savings so as to facilitate development by an investor. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to encourage governments to attract investments. But if investors want to come into our areas, then we put more charges on them. Why do we do that, National Treasury? I don't get you clear. What is the rationale of this bill? Because Section 160 and Section 229 of the Constitution, which we must not amend by any implication in this bill, let's leave them as they are, outline the powers of the municipality, what they are supposed to do in terms of development and as the authority to do 1, 2, 3. I think let's stick to what is in the Constitution and not bring something that is not in line with the Constitution. What is there in the Constitution as may? Let's leave it as may. There was an intention by those who drafted the Constitution at that time why it is drafted in this manner. But if a bill comes later and wants to suggest something else, I don't think it's right, because this is a constitutional democracy. Any bill that we have to pass as Parliament must be inconsistent with the Constitution. There are other issues, like, for instance, the issue of engineering services. Let's leave the definition as it is in the structures as SPLUMA. SPLUMA 2013 outlines, if you look at section 49, chapter 6 of SPLUMA, clearly define what engineering services is all about and what is it that the municipality is supposed to do and a whole range of other things. So there should be no implication that when us as this committee have to pass this bill, by implication, section 49 of SPLUMA has to be changed, because that is a facilitating kind of a legislation that governs development. And remember how long it took to pass SPLUMA after the Constitutional Court has struck off the Development Facilitation Act. For quite some time, I think from 2011 until something like 2016, there was no legislation that regulated land use and planning. And municipalities complained. Everything came to a standstill for almost 5, if not 6 years. After that, there were no regulations. I think regulations were gazetted somewhere 2017. It's then that development started from around 2011. And now we want to bring something else, which I don't think, DDG, what you are bringing here also suggests that we have to change definitions in the SPLUMA. Let's not do that. Let's make sure that we're passing we have to process a legislation that does not contravene other legislations. Because SPLUMA, for instance, is not our competence as a SCOF. It's a competency of a Rural and Land Reform Portfolio Committee. So Dr. George, for instance, asked a question about the grid. We just see companies saying that we are getting off the grid. Just like that. Is it done in other countries? I just wake up and switch off ESCOM system and do my own things. I don't think that should be in that manner. If this bill does not regulate that, and we just deal with development charges. But if, for instance, a municipality like Rustenburg, which in the main relies on rates and taxes from the mines, all those mines around Rustenburg, Beggersdorp, Beggersfort and others, just wake up and say, we are off the grid, and even in terms of water, we'll provide our own water because we have got our own sources underground and stuff like that. What's going to happen to government? And we just look at it and say, no, fine, because ESCOM is incompetent, you can just get off the grid and do as you like. I don't think that can be done in any other country except here in South Africa. There should be serious conditions if you have to get off the grid, and even when you are off the grid, there must be something that you must make that a business to continue to pay for services. Otherwise, we are going to collapse government, not only municipalities, but government nationally. So these are the things that you have to be alive to. There is an issue of payment. I think it was subsection 5, unless you have changed it. At some stage, there was an issue whether an owner must pay the full amount of a development charge prior to exercising the rights approved by the tribunal. If you have corrected that, fine, but I've been following this bill. And municipalities were saying, why should you say a developer must pay full amount, whereas there can be an agreement between the developer and the municipalities to pay in tranches until such time that a developer pays the full amount. Is then that a municipality will issue the clearance certificate. Because if a municipality does not issue a clearance certificate, obviously the developer knows the consequences. But just to be strict that do this, if not do this, there will be no development, is going to defeat the spirit of investment and development in municipalities. Convince us that this bill is going to attract investors and not rebuff or be repulsive to investment. Over to you, Treasurer.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose what we want to convince you of is that without this bill, we'll probably chase away the investors. So let me start here, Honorable Chair, in terms of the problem statement. So we started off by saying that this amendment is not introducing development charges, because development charges are already regulated in terms of SPLUMA, which expect that for any approved developments, that development charges may be applied. So what we are trying to plug here as a gap is actually how these development charges are being applied. So how are they being, what are the conditions of applying them? How do you calculate them? How do you use the money to ensure that the money actually goes to actual investments that requires development? So development charges is already there in the system. They call it different names, development levies. They are already doing that. But because they are not standardized, they are not uniform, it becomes very unpredictable in terms of how each jurisdiction actually charges them, which then opens up municipalities for litigations by developers, because there is no uniformity, there is no fairness, there is no equity in terms of how they are being applied. So I think that point should actually be appreciated, that we are not introducing this. And this is not only a feature of South Africa, as I said. In all other jurisdictions, development charges is a component of investment financing that actually jurisdictions and municipalities charges to developers. And I think if we come to the conclusion that says those that can pay should not pay for services, then it means that money has to come from somewhere. We need to tax more for people to be able to get those investments. So I think that would be the challenge if we start saying, no, don't have these development charges. The fiscals must actually pay, because money has to come from somewhere. And what we are seeing now in the system is that because of the slowness, the constraint that the fiscals is actually faced with, even the same developers take time for their developments to take off simply because they are waiting for infrastructure, right? And so now this actually enables them to be able to determine even the pace in which the developments can happen, because they actually will be able to pay. And the way they pay, they will be certain that the money is not going to be lost. The money is going to go to actually unlocking the investments. So that is why we have even allowed that where there is no capacity, that the investor can actually use their capacity to actually implement that in that bulk, to create that bulk infrastructure, so that you are overcoming the issues of capacity, you're overcoming the issues of misuse of development charges, which actually is something that is quite potential now, that investors have actually indicated that they have a problem with that there's no certain that if they have paid, that the money will actually go where it's supposed to go. So this is a once-off payment that the investor will be charged with. From there on, the normal charges of property tax and services that you are paying for would also be. And this ensures that municipality doesn't then burden other ratepayers to actually finance investment in other areas, because it means that money has got to come from somewhere. So somebody will have to be taxed, somebody will have to pay. And we are saying we need to ensure that this source that is already there in the system can actually be applied appropriately, that it can unlock the investments. Because without this money, we are not able to unlock investment. The fiscal is so much constrained that it will remain constraining investments, which also is a factor that we know the investors are concerned with, availability and reliability of the investments. So I think the issues of getting off the grid, those are actually big national, compensations, in terms of how do we address this problem that the country is faced with, of electricity that is actually in a way constraining development. And I think it's a very good example when you look at what is happening in energy in terms of its impact on development, that if the country doesn't solve that problem, then we will have a problem in terms of the investment. And the truth is, the fiscal is also constrained to actually say we are going to develop more infrastructure to provide for more energy and invest. The fiscal is constrained. And I think that is why part of the debate is, how do you bring private investments to be able to address this problem of supply of energy in the country? So I think that's, for me, is a bigger debate that is really beyond what we are trying to achieve with this legislation that is not introducing DC, but that is just formalizing the application and making them more understood, and also bringing capacity to support municipality to be able to optimize on this as a revenue source. So Wendy, I don't know if there's anything you want to add. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just two issues. With regard to, must the developer pay in full, or can it be paid in tranches? The legislation or the bill currently makes provision for payment in tranches. So there's no, as the development progresses, it is paid in the tranches as agreed to between the developer and the municipality concerned. So there's no need for a developer to pay upfront everything in one go. And then the question with regard to, does this make any changes to the Constitution? No, it does not. It respects all the provisions in the Constitution and is fully aligned to that. Then that is why it's not municipality must levy development charges, but the legislation is crafted to say development charges may be levied. So it is fully in line with how the Constitution is crafted. And respects the constitutional provisions. Then with regard to the question about the SPLUMA provisions, and we do refinements to the definitions, and it's very, very critical to make those definitions, just to make clear when development charges are applicable and when it is not applicable. We worked very, very closely with the National Department concerned on these definitions, and they're fully behind this. And they've indicated their support to these refinements to the bulk definitions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Are there follow-up questions before we move to the next item? It seems there's none. I hear you when you said there's a bigger debate about getting off the grid. But the Minister of Finance, when he presented his speech in Parliament, already has spoken about this issue of getting off the grid. So it's like already Treasury has taken a view in this regard. Can you prepare a presentation to speak to what the Minister was talking about and the implications to the municipalities? It's there in the budget speech. So it's not something that is still going to come. It's something that is a policy matter of this government. Can Treasury please tell us what is going to be the implications if everybody, every company, household just wakes up and decide to get off the grid? What implication financially and otherwise is going to have on the municipalities? It's a serious matter because we are looking forward. When we do legislations, we make sure that these legislations are not going to prejudice future generations, because we are not the last people to live in this world. We should not create problems for generations to come and they ask themselves, how did these people pass these legislations that are creating problems for us? Because many municipalities rely on water, electricity, and property rates to raise their own revenue. From there, they get a equitable share from national government. But if now big companies begin to get off the grid, what is going to be the implication of municipalities in terms of raising revenue? So it's not just an issue of a debate, it's an issue that National Treasury has taken a view through the speech that the minister has presented in Parliament. So we would like to get a clear briefing and detail, and if needs be, colleagues, I think we should also get SALGA to come to this platform as it is representing municipalities and take this debate so that whatever bill that we pass, we are fully aware of the consequences of such a legislation. Thanks very much. Frank, Advocate Frank, are we going to take, and Alan, this bill for public hearings, isn't it? That's my understanding.
Yes, Chair. Frank is the Scopa Committee. He indicated that he did. I must just send him. The committee will have hearings on the floor. We've already sent out the packet, and the closing date for submissions is Monday next week. Thank you.
Alan, your connectivity is a bit problematic. I just heard you at the end saying Monday next week. What's happening Monday next week?
Sorry, Chair. Frank indicated he's in Scopa, so he indicated we can send him a message if there's anything urgent. On the question of the bill, we've advertised closing date for submissions is next week, Monday, and the public hearings will be next week, Wednesday. Thank you.
Next week, Wednesday, what date will that be? Because I've seen somewhere we are going as a caucus to Johannesburg for Lekgotla. What date is that? Is it the 23rd or the 22nd?
That's the 22nd, Chair, Wednesday the 22nd.
Okay, I will have to check. Noxie, are you still in the platform? I've seen somewhere whether we're going to Boxback for Lekgotla. Okay, but let me see how we reconcile our diaries. Make sure that in the public hearings, SALGA should come because it represents municipalities. Inform them that they are supposed to come to this platform, and we engage with them and have a proper understanding of what this is it all about and what is their view in this regard. Thanks very much. Unless there are other announcements that we want to make before I close the meeting?
Chair, thank you. Just the committee is meeting with a delegation from the IMF at 12 o'clock. I sent through a link, a MS Teams link that we received from the IMF team. So it's from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, a bit later on. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Colleagues, let's adjourn the meeting until we meet again at 12. Thanks. The meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Recording
you.
stopped.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.